Hi everyone, my name is Martha. I'm a relationship counselor and clinical sexologist. And several months ago, I was running some workshops in Brisbane, and Peter Howie was the one who hosted me. So Peter and I became friends, and we thought that we would showcase each other by doing interviews with each other. So Peter, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
So Peter, tell people about your work.
Well, I've got a number of different elements to my work. On the one hand, I'm an adult sex and intimacy educator, which means the thing I tell people is I teach people what they didn't learn at school in sex education classes and what you can't learn from porn, because they seem to be the only forms of education most people end up with. And so I've got a good educational base from the Sexological Bodywork. And but prior to that, I've been a group psychotherapist and a psychotherapist more generally, specializing in psychodrama, which is use of drama in therapeutic settings. And putting the two together is a lot of fun. So that's what I'm doing, is mostly working with individual clients and setting up workshops to work with groups around areas of sexuality and intimacy that mostly aren't dealt with. Especially, I mean, what set of workshops I've got coming up in the year are around consent, because everyone knows that consent's very important, but most people don't know how to get over their own fear of rejection, don't know what they actually want to ask for. Most people aren't very good at saying no to people if they want to love them. So it's really good to be able to use experiential and playful ways of getting people to know themselves, rather than just saying, well, you've got to ask for consent. It doesn't help.
So what made you go into the field of sex and sexuality? Because it's all very proper being a psychotherapist and doing psychodrama.
Oh, well, I think, I think it started a long time ago. Um, I went the opposite way of most people into sex. Um, as a teenager, I got involved in a religious group, which was quite anti-sex, I think. It was certainly anti-pleasure, because it just saw spiritual pleasure as the main thing and everything else was secondary. And so here I was as a 16-year-old learning to meditate every day for an hour or two, doing good works and all these other things. And all my other friends were going and taking drugs and having all sorts of rambunctious, radical sex all over the place. And I never actually got to play with sex. And so when I got into my first long-term relationship, that didn't work very well, either sexually or relationally. And so when that finished, I tried to improve my sex life. And then I mostly dealt with my deficits in my relational system. So I did psychotherapy and group psychotherapy and trained in psychodrama and did a lot of other things. So I got very good at communicating and getting with people and getting people to talk about themselves. But sex in the Australian culture is something that's joked about but not talked seriously about, unless you've got a physical illness. Um, so I think I was at a men's conference, and this strange character called Deej Juventon was there, and he was giving workshops, and I didn't go to any of the workshops. They seemed thoroughly boring, and anyway, I was running my own about other forms of psychotherapy. But then I thought, well, my wife at the time was having problems with vaginal pain. So I just said, oh, look, can you do anything about this? And he said, oh, yeah, come and see me. Anyway, so I went and saw him, and we both went and saw him. And for a number of years, he gave us some guidance and coaching about all sorts of very different ways that we could enjoy our sex life apart from having sex. And um, later on, when that relationship ended and I'd finished my PhD and I was working out what to do next, I thought, well, I'd often thought about doing the training because I enjoyed what I was doing with Deej, what I brought and integrated into my life. And I thought, well, I'd like to train, and like a lot of training, I'm not different from others in this. I think, well, I'll probably get a lot for myself, and if I decide to use it with others, well, that'll be a bonus. But I wasn't sure. And then when I started doing the training, I found it very good for me. I really enjoyed it, but I still wasn't sure that I'd enjoy doing it with other people, because I've been doing psychotherapy for nearly 30 years. And working psychotherapeutically is fine, but I got slightly tired of the same old problems with people. And in all that 30 years, I'd never discussed people's sex life in any depth whatsoever. And I began to develop this theory that if I dealt with people's sex lives, there'd probably be a lot less therapy that was needed. And dealing with people from their relationships, but not focusing on their sex lives at all, because most people didn't know what to do to improve their sex lives. It meant I wasn't bringing as much wisdom as I could to the relationships with my clients. So anyway, I did the training, and then I started working with clients, and I found the results to be wonderfully satisfying. I mean, it didn't mean people had better relationships, but at least they had better sex in the relationships they had. And people weren't leaving because of bad sex. They were leaving for very sensible reasons often. And when people were single, they were able to involve themselves in orgasmic yoga and mindful masturbation. And it gives people, I found I was able to give people ways to empower themselves, to not always be making decisions from a point of not having enough. They weren't always thinking, I need more sex, but they're thinking, well, I'm happy with the sex life I've got, and I would like to be with more people, or I'd like to have a partner, or so that's what got me into it.
Mm. Thank you for sharing. So what you're saying is it started off as a personal journey,
Yeah,
and then you decided to use what you learned to support other people. And
that's right.
and it's good what you said that you weren't sure whether you would enjoy working with people, and so this just kind of evolved.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of worked out that, you know how you rewrite your history quite a lot of the time, depending on where you are in the present. But I do remember in boarding school, and before I went to boarding school, realizing there's a lot of what I would now call erotic pleasure, which we're not allowed to have as children. We're not meant to be seen to be playing with ourselves. We're not meant to be seen to be playing with each other. But in boarding school, there was a lot of sexual activity amongst the younger boys, and it was very enjoyable. It was very rare, because we actually would probably rather run and play chasings after each other than do anything sexual. But late at night, when we're all asleep in the dormitory, then we might think, well, my penis is hard. I wonder if someone will touch it. I mean, it was only subsequently, it was quite a few years later, I discovered almost every boy in primary school had had a homosexual experience with every other boy at one time or another. No one kept them up. It was all very furtive, and we knew we were doing wrong, even though we didn't know why we were doing wrong. So in a sense, at this late stage in my life, I'm 63 now, that I'm able to be playful around sex like I was when I was very young. And that's pretty
Mhm.
amazing. And I feel very safe about it. And I feel very safe in the sense that I'm not worried about what other people are going to say or do, or their judgments, because especially from my therapeutic experience, I've learned that most people have pretty weird lives, and most people aren't particularly oriented to their own pleasure or their own happiness.
So it's almost as if you have reclaimed your inner child.
Yeah, my inner erotic child.
Yeah. And because you didn't get to really explore that when you were younger,
Yeah,
do you feel that there's a part of you that was seeking the parts that was missing?
it's a good question. Yeah, yeah, I think that's very right. So when I started off saying I've done my life a bit backwards, because when I was in the religious group, I went into a monastic order.
Mm.
So we actually became asexual,
Mm.
even though I dreamt about sex now and again, and masturbation was frowned on, and no one did it as far as I'm aware.
Mm.
Anyway, after the ashrams closed down, I discovered everyone except me and a few others were having sex all the time. They just all felt guilty about it, didn't talk about it. So that was very strange. And then after that time, I was very repressed in my expression of sexuality, and got together with a person who found sex very destabilizing in their own lives. And then I got with a person who had lived a full sex life before they got with me, and found everything exploratory rather dull. So they weren't keen for me to explore. They're quite happy. They just didn't want to hang out with me if I did. So they said, well, yes, you go off and explore sexually, but don't expect me to come along. And so that was very hard to find a life where I could explore and the people around me would be supportive, because it's essential to have a community of friends around that are supportive. But now I've got close relationships with partners who are very supportive of an exploratory sex life and join me in it when they can and when we're able. So finding parts of myself is very right.
Mm.
God, it takes a long time, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does sound like you are leading the life that you want and that is making you feel happy.
Yeah.
How about um, whether you could address some of the common questions that people always ask around sex addiction, porn addiction, masturbation addiction? Because
Yeah.
you have psychotherapy training. So what would you say to that? Peter, you're just having too much fun. Don't you think it's there's a point of too much? Would you say to that?
I'll just say no. Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because in Australia we have what we call a Protestant work ethic that's quite strong, and the Catholic part of it has it as well. But it's sort of like because the good times happen after you die in heaven. We're meant to be industrious now. We're meant to constantly produce, constantly work, have children, build up the community, the whole thing. Um, it's not as strong as it used to be, but it's people still have it and they don't question it, even if it's not good for their health or good for their families or good for themselves. Um, I simply argue that people have different values to me, and most people rarely, if ever, question where they got their values from. Some people have adopted a few values on top of the ones they learned from their family, school, and community, but most people have a bunch of values that they developed in their childhood. And who in their right mind would go to a child and ask them what values they should follow? But every time I work with a client, they're oriented to values that they developed when they were 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And they'll tell me that, they'll say, look, I learned very young that, and then they'll tell me what they've learned. And I think, have you ever gone back and examined what you've learned? I mean, people have said the most ridiculous things to me that they believe. And I just think, well, why do they believe it? And so in therapy, I'm able to ask them, well, why do you believe that? Because no one's ever asked them why. And or I'll find you do counselling and therapy, so you find ways to say, why do you believe that? You might go, well, what's led you to believe that, or why are you so confident in this belief? And when it comes to erotic life, I just think most people are afraid to talk about it. So most people don't even challenge me about my focus. They're still wondering what the hell, how the hell I got into it. And I think a lot of people are suspicious about what would it be like for them if they just followed their own dreams, whatever their dreams were. Not everyone's dreams to have more sex, but a lot of people don't follow their dreams at all. I think I answered your question, but I'm not sure. Oh, that's right. What do I do if people tell me I'm too hedonistic? And I just acknowledge it. I say, well, I am more hedonistic than most, and most people that get accused of being sex addicts, there's no addiction involved, they just like it. Many people are accused of being porn addicts, and I just ask them, how often do you watch porn? And they'll go, oh, every day. And I'll say, for how long? And they'll go, oh, maybe 10 minutes. And I'll say, how much do you watch TV every day? And they go, oh, 2 hours. And I think, okay, you're a TV addict. I mean, it's ridiculous to call yourself a porn addict because you use porn to masturbate. It's just, I mean, if someone watches porn for hours and hours and hours and hours and they can't work, they don't eat, they don't look after themselves, they neglect their family, then they might be a porn addict. If their penis gets sore because they're masturbating so much, then maybe they're a porn addict. But I think the number of people that are porn addicts as against the number of people that feel guilty from doing things they enjoy is very different.
That's great answer. Thank you. So during this lockdown, you also told me that you do work with clients virtually and of
Yep.
course in person. So can you explain more about what specifically you do in supporting adults with intimacy?
Well, a lot of my clients are in partnerships. They're married or they've got a full-time partner or someone that they live with or someone they see a lot. And so they're kind of coming and seeing me to see if they can improve their relationship. So mostly I see individuals and they want to know what it is they can do to have a better sex life with their partner. Now, a lot of it I can do just by asking questions. The reason why I can do it by asking questions is most people don't have anyone to talk about real sex with ever. They don't talk about it with their partner. So who else are they going to talk about it with? And they don't usually talk about it with psychotherapists because psychotherapists are ignorant. So I'm just talking about people's sex lives, and I say to them, so how often do you masturbate? And most people have never been asked how often they masturbate. And I say, what do you do when you masturbate? And they go, oh, well, I do, and then I say, no, well, do you, because many people masturbate very differently. Some people masturbate by using their hand on their penis. And all the people that use their hand on their penis, if they were watching this, will go, yes, well, how else can you do it? Well, some people lie down on a pillow and don't touch their penis at all. Some people use vibrators. Some people use all sorts of different creatures and things. So it's very interesting to find out what people do. And then some people use porn as part of the beginning part of masturbation. Some people use it all the way through. Some people don't use it. Some people just say to me, I remember things or I have an imagination. So I get people to talk about this. And just in them talking about it, they start to loosen up, to have discussions. And that means, in all likelihood, if they start to talk about some of these areas with their partners, they won't feel so guarded. So guarded's a good word. A lot of people feel guarded. If you want to have a discussion with someone and open them up, and I'm guarded, if I'm a guarded person, there's no way the other person's going to open up, be vulnerable. But you don't have to be vulnerable. People feel vulnerable in the first instance. So when they come and work with me, especially online, they overcome feeling guarded. They just, they don't no longer feel vulnerable when they're talking about sex. Because talking about it doesn't need to make people vulnerable. Maybe doing it's very good to be vulnerable. But talking about it should be very straightforward, but it isn't in Australia or Singapore or pretty much anywhere that I've found so far. So I find I've worked with people over 2 or 3 weeks. I might start getting them conscious of their breath, getting them conscious of self-touch. Most people have never touched themselves anywhere on their body for pleasure. So I had one woman who showed me a part on her body that wasn't her genitals, that is the most pleasurable part of touch. It's more pleasurable than touching her genitals or a clitoris or anything. And I'd say, when do you do this? And she'd say, oh, before bed. And how long would you do this for? And she'd go, oh, I'll just do it once. And I say, well, what about you do it for 10 minutes? And just the idea of it was so different for her. When I saw her next week, she'd started doing it more and expanding it out. And she was finding different experiences in her bodies. So most people view self-touch, apart from genitals, a bit like the idea of trying to tickle themselves. It's almost impossible, except for very rare people. We can't tickle ourselves. So people think, well, yeah, it's just touch. But actually, we can touch ourselves in a way that is very calming, comforting, and pleasurable. So I can work with that on Zoom. And if people start to do those things on Zoom, then they start to open up to other ways. So I start to say, well, where are you with your genitals and masturbation? And they're highly clitoral centered or vaginal centered or penis centered. And I say, okay, well, let's, this next week, can you include your inner thighs? Can you include your tummy? And some do, some don't. So the main thing I've worked out is if anyone's prepared to practice, they'll learn something different, because pretty much all these practices are new for just about everyone I work with, even though they may have had a lot of experience in their lives. I mean, some people I've worked with are sex workers and they've never touched themselves much. They only touch other people. Anyway, how's that?
Yeah. So I just want to ask around the kinds of common issues that people come to you for.
Well, mostly at the moment I'm seeing men, and that changes. Firstly, I started seeing women, but mostly I'm seeing men at the moment. And most of them are talking about premature ejaculation, and to the extent of ejaculating before any insertion in anything. And finding out what people mean by premature ejaculation is very interesting. Often it has only, I wouldn't call it premature ejaculation in the way people think about it. I'd call it people being too excited at the time before they need to be able to use their penis for something else. And that's all it is. And the excitement comes from a number of different places, and sometimes it comes from the anxiety of having to perform. It comes from the excitement of wanting to come and wanting to have the sexual experience, or it comes from, I better come soon, or this may all stop. So there's a whole lot of psychological reasons that people haven't even learned to articulate for themselves. For instance, one client was telling me about, I'm just thinking about how to talk about this situation without giving the client away. So one, this isn't the only type, but some clients start having a sexual warm-up with their partners, and then their partner gets quite critical of their performance. So they have to really rush it in order to come before they succumb to the absolute misery they feel of being so bad. And then they get accused of premature ejaculation. So they're going to be accused whatever happens. So that it gets quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker, and in the end stops altogether. And those relationships don't continue usually. And that's not a lot of fun. So people, mostly with problems with erections and coming too soon. And most of those problems, almost all of them, are to do with expectations and people being so genitally focused that anyone would have premature ejaculation. If all the pleasure is put on that space and everything has to happen in a certain time frame, it's no big surprise. But no one, and none of these people are oriented to pleasure. They're oriented to coming. They're oriented to an end point. So that would be the other side of it, is people never question what they're trying to get out of sex.
So this also has to do with communication, because a lot of well, I would say heterosexual couples that I work with, the men actually feel the feedback that their partner is giving is very critical, but their partner doesn't feel that it's critical, and they don't tell their partner, so their partner doesn't know the damage that is being caused. and
Yeah.
so this will involve couples counseling as well. Okay,
Yeah.
so what I'm getting from you is that you support people when it comes to adult sex education and intimacy. Work with men and women, and with men, a lot of it is premature ejaculation, and a lot of what you are doing is bringing people back to their bodies and
Yep.
back to pleasure.
Yeah. And back to
Cool.
not feeling scared to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've heard, I'm not sure what it's called in psychology, but the concept of loss aversion, that it's much worse to lose something than it is to gain that same thing. So
Yeah.
people, so what that means to me is when it comes to sex with couples, the sex may be bad or not satisfying or not enough, but at least I've got it. If I start talking about it or questioning it, I might lose even that. And the fear of losing what they have, which may not be very good, but the fear of losing it, which would include more shame and more rejection and more isolation, is too great. So people would hang on, and if it's not great, they'll tell them it's better than nothing. And you know, it's a very poverty consciousness is a term a friend uses.
I like the way that you're saying it, because I think there was a time when I was younger, and that's exactly what I went through. I would stop myself from pursuing or developing relationships because I would be like, well, what's the point? The person's not going to be in my life, or nah, I don't think this is someone that I'm going to marry anyway, so let's just forget about it. Or I would go to a retreat or a conference, and then I'll make new friends, and I will not open up myself because it's like, well, what's the point? I'm not even from this place. These people aren't even people that I'm going to stay in touch with. I don't think this person is somebody who is going to want to stay in touch with me. So I
Yeah,
shouldn't bother to cultivate this relationship or friendship.
yeah,
This is
that's right.
exactly what you're talking about, the fear of loss, poverty, consciousness.
Yeah,
And we never know, because now with technology, I am now able to stay in touch with friends all around the world,
yeah,
and yeah, so I think a lot of the things that we think sometimes requires reframing and healing, and then the world doesn't become this small place that we think of it
that's
as
right.
what it is. Okay, so Peter, I want to ask you something, because
Yeah,
of course you are an older person, and I want to
I
ask a
am
very pointed
very old.
question.
Yeah,
I want to ask you a very pointed question around, do you think that there's an expiry age to sex?
yeah,
And
it is.
so what do you say to people who say things like, yeah, I've been there, done that. Sex is not important because I'm old, and I'm not trying to make a baby. Or people who have gone through menopause saying that, yeah, it's too late for me. Or guys who say things like, oh yeah, my penis doesn't work anymore, so why do I bother? What would you
Yeah.
say to all these things?
Well, first off, the age where sex becomes unimportant is the age when you die. And secondly, people don't get tired of sex. They get tired of the type of sex they're having. And I've I've got a couple of things I've tried on people. With individuals, I just ask them, uh, how old were you when you first started to masturbate? Has your masturbation changed much in the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years for some of them? And almost all of them say, not much. And then if there are couples, I say, even if both couples aren't there, but one of them, I say, well, in the beginning, so you probably still have good sex now. So I give them the benefit of the doubt. I say, you probably still have good sex now. How different is it to the good sex you had at the beginning of your relationship? Apart from then you had it all the time and now you don't have it all the time. And most people acknowledge they're still having exactly the same type of sex they had at the beginning of their relationship. The warm-up is the same, who initiates is the same, everything's the same, as though that's what sex is. and neither will address what's going on in the relationship or say they want to change because they'll appear kinky or who knows. The habits that get formed straight away. So that's what I'd say. And some people are asexual. There's no two ways about it. But, you know, I've got a colleague who swears they're asexual because they only masturbate for 10 minutes every 2 or 3 times a week. And I just think, what the? You're not asexual. You're masturbating and you look at particular porn. And anyway, he's got an acquired brain injury, so I don't give him a hard time. But pleasure is not something that people know how to deal with well. And if pleasure is defined as a particular thing done in a particular way, as though that's all of it, of course people get bored with it. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there are some types of sweets that we can eat all the time. And there are some types that just you'd get sick of if you had every day or you have too much. Even cake, if you have too much, one piece is nice, the second piece is never as nice as the first. And if you have, no one has a third piece of cake unless you've got, I don't know, probably Asian mother or Jewish mothers or their mothers all over the world.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answer. I love what you're saying. There is no expiry to our sexuality, and I love that you have such a rich experience in psychotherapy, psychodrama, and now sexological bodywork. I love what you shared with us in how you support clients with coming back to pleasure to their body and to let go of fear of rejection and fear of being vulnerable. And I also love your energy. I love how gentle and calming and loving you are. So I really wish you all the best with your practice, and I hope people who watch this interview will approach you and contact you. So how can they get in touch with you?
Look, I've got a website, drpeterhowie.com. How's that? I just thought I won't call myself a fancy name. I'll just go straight for my name. I've got a doctorate now, so I can call myself Dr. Peter Howie and then just throw .com at the end. And there's not that many of us working in Brisbane, so search for Peter Howie and sex or sex coaching will find me as well.
Yes, and people can also work with you virtually because you do embodiment practices. And I have actually started to refer some of my clients to him, people with penises, because I don't do touch or nudity in my work, and a lot of the people with penises, when I want to work with them around embodiment practices, what ends up happening is they tend to sexualize me, meaning they tend to masturbate to me, which is definitely not something that I'm open to. These are just my boundaries. And so Peter would be a great person to talk to, because sometimes it's different when you work with someone who also has a penis. So this has been Martha. Please check out Peter's website. That's drpeterhowie.com.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you. Bye.